In the last video, I talked about the off-road performance and some of the flaws that I noticed with the 2022 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392 with the Xtreme Recon package. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the aftermarket modifications that you can make to correct those flaws and make this a better overall vehicle off-road. First of all, up front, let's look at this front bumper. It comes from the factory winch ready, meaning that you can unbolt this little plate here, bolt in a winch plate, and put a winch on here. I'd recommend sticking with an 8,000 to 9,000 pound winch to avoid overloading the front end. You already have a V8 up there. You don't need any more weight. So in order to reduce some weight, you could install a aluminum fair lead with synthetic winch line and look for a lightweight, an overall lightweight winch. That'll help maintain suspension performance, especially in the faster terrain. Moving on to the suspension, I really think that this could benefit from a performance shock. The shocks are valved very soft on this Jeep. So a shock with a firmer valving, or better yet, adjustable valving, a high-end large diameter shock that can dissipate the heat with compression adjustment or overall adjustment, like a external bypass type shock, would be great on this. What I would also recommend up here to help improve the suspension travel would be to install a small coil spacer, maybe an inch tall, maybe 3/4 of an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter. But what that will do is that will bump up the height even more and maybe get you into the next length shock. That'll give you more down travel, and that'll solve that other problem that we noticed of the shocks topping out in rougher terrain. So that would probably get you into like a 3-inch type lift shock, which is the next step up. Again, I don't know the length of these shocks, but I'm guessing that they are a 0 to 2-inch lift type shock. You'll notice that this bump stop here has some damage to it, so we haven't been beating on it that hard, but the bump stop's already splitting. This could be a really good candidate for either a bolt-in or a weld-in hydraulic bump stop as well. There's a lot of weight up here, and you just need to find a way to control it. The factory, could totally do something like this. They already have the Mojave for the Gladiator, so maybe they could employ some of the Gladiator tactics to this suspension as well. Onto the rear suspension, it's a little more complicated because we'd be between shock sizes, so there's no need to really lift the back. So I'd like to see the aftermarket find a way to optimize the shock lengths back here so they're not topping out and of course not bottoming out at the same time. So some optimization in rear shocks would be great, and also upgrading to some large diameter compression adjustable or just overall adjustable bypass, external bypass shocks would be great back here. Moving on to the body armor, I really like these rocker guards. They're clean and sleek, and you don't get your pant leg dirty when you get in and out. But if you frequent heavy rock areas, then you're probably going to want something a little more durable, something maybe that even has like a tube that comes out and protects the body and pushes the body away from any type of trail obstacle. But overall, these, for overlanding, for regular off-roading, sand, anything else, the factory rocker guards here are more than enough. The only place I would upgrade these is if you plan to go into heavy rocks. The same is true of the skid plates underneath. Of course, the Jeep has the factory gas tank skid plate made out of steel, looks like there, and it has a transfer case skid plate. And up here under the transmission and engine, you don't have a lot of skid plates going on here. You have a cross member protecting it, but the transmission and the transmission lines are relatively vulnerable. This is an early 392 oil pan, I've been told. The later version is made out of steel and not aluminum, and it's has a higher clearance. So there should be skid plates available, hopefully for both if you have an early version. But that would be something that you'd want to protect for sure if you plan on off-roading in heavy rocks. Moving on to the tires and wheels, a lot of people are going to want to make the switch to a 37-inch tire. I'd have a really hard time making that move. It opens up a huge Pandora's box of all kinds of problems. First and foremost would be rubbing on the inner fender. It's going to tear this piece off, it's going to rub all over this inner fender. And there are aftermarket fenders available that you could purchase to solve that problem, but you're only gaining about 1 inch of clearance with a 37, so that's a lot to consider just for an extra 1 inch of clearance. Up front, the 37 will fit slightly more easily, but again, you know, it's a lot to consider because you're probably going to tax the steering system. You're probably going to start throwing a lot more weight and leverage at the axles and drivetrain, and you really have to think if that's important to you. If you're driving around the street, 37s are probably going to be fine. You're not going to have any problem with the axles or steering or any of that. But off-road, the performance will be diminished with a larger tire. All you're gaining is a ground clearance. I really like the factory bead locks on and the tires, obviously the 35-inch tires, so I would stick with those. But the factory bead locks, they're actually bead lock capable, meaning that you have to purchase the aftermarket ring to make them real bead locks. The rings run about $100, but you already made the purchase to buy the bead lock wheels with the Jeep, so you might as well finish it up and put them on there, unless your Jeep, unless your state doesn't allow bead locks. If that's the case, then you know it is what it is, and you could just run these the way they are. So overall, those are a few modifications that I would consider. Of course, there's all kinds of exterior gadgets and gewgaws that you could install to make your Jeep ugly. But I really like the factory body line, so I don't think I would change much on the exterior or even the interior. If you have any questions or comments, put them down below and I'll get to them when I can.